Good day, everybody. Everything new under the sun. We know an antichrist leader, a one world government, a leader is coming who will bring peace. Of course, it's a pseudo peace, it's a fake peace, but will bring peace and will seem to allay the fears of many and solve a lot of issues. Maybe famine, maybe the pandemic, maybe the economy. He will fix all this. We know that because he's going to create a peace deal, a peace covenant for a 7-year period. He's going to bring a new monetary system known as the mark of the beast. So presumably he's going to bring that in because the current world economic system is broken and he wants to fix it. Of course, he's got other reasons for doing it, but that's going to be the excuse. And of course, everything that is brought in is for good reasons, for our health, for our safety, for our economic well-being, etc., etc. And so there will be this world leader that comes in and creates peace. And the world is kind of transitioning into a state where everybody just wants to get back to normal. Things have been so crazy with the pandemic. And people are at a state where they'll almost accept anything just to go back to normal, just to get back to regular life. And let me tell you, we're not going back to regular life. But there will be a short period, where people think, you know what, if I worship this leader, this beast, and this world government, you know, he won't appear as a beast, or his name won't be a beast, or have some scary image, not to start with, because everybody's going to worship him to start with. Maybe he's going to be beautiful. We know Satan comes as an angel of light, a very beautiful person. And so, people are going to follow this world leader for all the best reasons in the world. And they just want to get back to regular life. They're not Christians. If they are Christians, they're not reading their Bible because they don't know what comes in the last days. So to this article, this is one of these things I think is significant. Entire Muslim world will recognize Israel if it withdraws to 67 line. And Israel at some point will accept a peace agreement or go along with a peace agreement led by the Antichrist figure. And so Israel needs to be in such a state where, they're sick and tired of war, sick and tired of threats of war, that they'll be willing to accept an agreement put forth by this world leader between Israel and the Palestinians or Iran or any warring neighbors, etc. So we are moving there slowly. I think I suggest to you that there's going to be a war breakout between Israel and Iran that will be bad enough to where Israel will say, no longer, we're not going to do this anymore. We want peace now. And the whole world will be screaming for it. They'll say, you know what, you almost took us to World War III. We need peace. And the whole world will be yelling and screaming for peace and demanding peace. And the Muslim world included. And so Israel will be in such a place, the citizens will be like, we can't do this anymore. Let's just agree to withdraw to the 67 lines. And the Muslim world, they're saying they will accept us then. So maybe if we do that little bit, they'll accept us. And what do we see happening? Well, this is exactly the way the world is going. The Muslim world, the Middle East, Israel, they're moving in this direction where a world leader can come in and really say, okay, done. Let's do it. Israel, go to 67 borders. Great. We have peace. Peace and security. Wonderful thing. Everybody pass presents around. Everything is awesome in the world. And many people do believe that the peace and the security of the world hinges on the peace in the Middle East, specifically Israel and the Palestinians. They figure if they can solve that issue, they can fix world hunger and bring peace upon the whole planet, etc., which is obviously quite a naive understanding of it, but that's what they believe. So I think it's interesting that the Muslim world is moving towards this. A Saudi representative to the UN said the entire Muslim world will recognize Israel if it withdraws to the Green Line. Of course, in Israel, it's not defensible at some point. The borders get so tight in and so close to Jerusalem that they don't really have a country that they can defend in any meaningful way. But this is what the Muslim world says. They want, if Israel simply withdraws to 67 line, then they'll recognize it. So this is coming. I think a war between Israel and Iran, or a larger war will come, which will really set the stage and will really put a taste in people's mouth for peace, where they'll be yelling and screaming, declaring and voting for peace of any sort, no matter what it takes. Withdraw to 67 lines, give away this, give away that. They'll be desperate for peace. So that's Israel. Interesting situation. And of course, Iran moving quickly toward a weapon of mass destruction. It seems like they're very, very, very close to a delivery vehicle for a nuclear warhead, of course, which is aimed at Israel. Their stated goal is to take out Israel. That's what they want to do. Quickly on this one, this is interesting. Breitbart. Police, crooks are using Apple AirTag trackers to target vehicles for theft. And I thought, what a funny and sad headline all at the same time. But thieves are buying $29 Apple AirTag devices, and they're putting it on. They're looking at a car. Maybe it's an expensive car, Mercedes-Benz, whatever. They're putting it on there so that they can then track that vehicle home, and then they know where that person with lots of money lives. So isn't that interesting? Using what everybody thought was good technology. You know, you can track your parcels and your luggage around so you don't lose them. But then the evil in the world always uses the same thing for evil against you and I. And this is what is happening here. And you look at AirTags and you see, how could that possibly be used by criminals to do anything bad? But they found a way. They are buying AirTags, $29 a pop, cheap for them. Because they're just going to go and steal what's everything else more expensive after they track you home. They know exactly where you are. They sit, from wherever they are on their cell phone tracking this AirTag. Once they know exactly where, they don't even have to tail you. They don't even have to follow you home anymore. You're literally telling them exactly where you are. And then what the AirTag also does, now they know where your home is. Next time you leave the house, they also know that you're away from home, and that's when they can go up to your house because the car is gone and break in, steal, do whatever they're going to do. So I think it's interesting. And what this makes me think of is the mark of the beast. It's going to come in like an Apple AirTag. Everybody's going to think, yeah, this is awesome for our health and safety. Everybody should do it. If you don't do this, you don't love others. You aren't a Christian. You're selfish. You aren't helping the greater good. You aren't moving along the greater good. You aren't a good citizen of the planet, of the world, if you don't accept this. And the technology will be good for a lot of reasons, this mark of the beast technology. But we know ultimately that it will be used for nefarious purposes by the Antichrist to track people and to finally limit their buying and selling. Right? Doesn't that sound like what's going on today? Limit their buying and selling and travel, limit their buying, selling, and moving about if they don't worship the beast and the number of the beast. So this is that's what it made me think of. It's good technology. The technology is not bad. It's not inherently bad or evil. It's how it's used. And you look at these Apple AirTags, how could they ever be used for bad purposes? And that's what people will say about implants and chips in your right hand or forehead. They'll say, how could this possibly be used? This is confirming your identity. There's no way someone can use this against you, but there will be a way for sure. All right, this is what I want to finish up on. This is why we know the return of the Lord is very near, and this is a significant one. So don't fade out now. Pay attention to this. What happened in the Garden of Eden was that Adam and Eve ate of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And Satan said they would become as God if they ate this fruit. What they got is knowledge of good and evil. They were then ashamed of themselves. They couldn't think a bad thought before this, apparently. So this is Genesis chapter 3. Verse 22. And the Lord God said, behold, the man has become as one of us, to know good and evil. And now, lest he put forth his hand and take also of the tree of life and eat and live forever. Therefore, the Lord God sent him forth from the Garden of Eden to till the ground from whence he was taken. So they knew good and evil. If Adam and Eve took the next step, they ate the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. If they took the next step and ate from the tree of life, which gives you immortality effectively, that means they would be living in sin forever. Right? They were immortal at that point in time in the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve were. Until they ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Then sin came in because God told them not to eat of that tree. It was for their own good. For their God had his reasons, and it was a good reason for man and woman. And this was to see if they would choose him and obey him, and they didn't. And because they would have to live forever in sin if they ate of the tree of life, God sent them out of the Garden of Eden. He didn't want them to live in sin forever. After that, because he had a plan, because Jesus, he knew Jesus would be coming to the earth, 4,000 years later. Is it 4,000? Yeah, 4,000. 4,000 years later, to pay for the sin of mankind. Ultimately, God knew what was going to happen. He knew they were going to sin. And he didn't want immortal beings living in sin forever. So he made our lives mortal so that we would die, so that we could accept the free gift of salvation, and we wouldn't eternally be in sin, but have the option to accept the free gift of salvation and get out of sin. So Adam and Eve were driven from the Garden of Eden so they couldn't live forever in sin. And that was a punishment upon them because they sinned against God. So he took away their immortality for a specific reason, because he doesn't want immortal beings forever sinning, obviously. What happened at the flood? The whole idea with the Nephilim. Again, God chose to kill all humanity on earth except for Noah, the 8 on the ark, because the Nephilim had come and caused trouble in the gene, in the genome, in the DNA, and effectively meant that they would be immortal and sinful immortally, eternally. And again, that's not part of God's plan. So what did he do? He cut it off there. What is the cutoff point? When they're gaining immortality and they're in sin, that's when God says, that's it. That's too much. This is my red line. This is my line in the sand. I'm going to stop it now. I do not want human beings living forever in sin, because he's a God of love. He loves us. He wants us to choose rightly, but he gives us the freedom of choice. We can choose for or against God, but he gives us that freedom to choose one way or another. We keep choosing another, right? But we do have the choice to accept that free gift of salvation. So again, Adam and Eve were removed from the garden within which they had immortality. All humanity was killed at the flood of Noah, except for Noah and his family. Again, because of sin and the potential of immortality getting into the gene sequence by the Nephilim, the fallen angels. And so what's coming? Well, I think that same red line is God's red line again for the last days. He is going to leave it right up until we figure out how to live maybe immortally. Are we getting there with science? Well, this is an interesting article. Israel 365 News. New startup to alter genetics to slow and reverse aging process. So this is how we know we're in the very last days. We're just prior to judgment, because every time this happens, the Lord comes back, judges, and restarts. Here's the possible messianic implications, says the author. While many mega billionaires are looking to the stars, at least one is looking closer to home, launching a bio startup that seeks to tap into new advances in the genetics to increase human health span and perhaps even reverse the aging process. Now, there's a lot of power inside our bodies in the DNA sequence. There's flags that you can turn on and off in the genome, in the body, which limit aging, even allow the body to repair itself. God knows where those are, and science is kind of catching up to that, to where they know the flags and the binary bits and bytes that they need to turn on and off, parts of the DNA and the genome, to allow the body to regenerate itself and possibly live forever. And this is God's red line. This is when we get there, or just at that point, maybe just ahead of that point, this is where God's going to say, okay, this is the same red line as I had for Adam and Eve. This is the same red line as for Noah and the people on the earth prior to the flood. And this is when his judgment is going to fall. So every time this happens, his judgment falls. When we seek immortality while in sin, when we seek immortality while we are still in sin, we don't accept Jesus Christ as Messiah, this is when he says, that's it. That's too far. I'm not letting you go further. Because he loves us, and he doesn't want any human to live eternally in sin, because that is, obviously not good. Brian Armstrong, the billionaire CEO of cryptocurrency platform Coinbase, announced his newest endeavor, New Limit, a company focused on lengthening the human health span. Some people have an aversion to the idea of living longer when they first hear about it, the statement said. They're often imagining being frail in old age and extending this unpleasant experience. Imagine if you could live the same number of years but be free from pain and have the same mobility and cognition as someone in their 30s. If we could maintain this state, indefinitely, I guess, how many of us would still want to have our lifespan end at the normal time? Aging is one of the largest sources of pain and suffering, and hiding. Actually, the largest source of pain and suffering is sin in the world. And that's never going to stop, because man brought in pain and suffering through sin. That was our choice. It says, and we believe there is moral imperative to try and end this suffering. Don't turn to God. This is what they're saying. Don't turn to God because God wants to heal our pain and suffering. Don't turn to him. We will get new bodies when we go to heaven. Don't accept that. We're going to fix ourselves. We're going to be our own gods. We're going to build the Tower of Babel, come together with all our smarts and technology, and live forever in sin. And we don't have to accept Jesus Christ. We don't have to accept that we're sinners. This is effectively what this is all about. And what happens in the Bible every time we get to this point? God brings destruction. And I believe that destruction is just around the corner. This is so close. I'll leave it there, guys. Thanks for watching. You let me know what you think of that. We'll see you in the next video.